I thought it would be fun to see how this one scripture, Genesis 3:15, unites these three random, completely unhinged Bible stories. First, there's the talking donkey that didn't star in Shrek, otherwise known as a talking donkey, story 42 in the children's book, My Book of Bible Stories, debatably children's book. There's Lot and his daughters, or Lot's wife looked back, story 15, and David and the Five Skins. Story 1, the donkey. The king of Moab and the Israelites are in a turf war, okay? So the king of Moab sends his right-hand man, Balaam, to tell Israel, basically, we're enemies and this is our corner and you can't dwell on our land. And Jehovah sees this and he's like, oh, well, I don't want him to put a curse on my people and tell my people to get out of this land. So I'm going to send an angel to stop him. So he sends this angel, but doesn't give him clear directions, I guess. So the angel just kind of is there, shows up in the middle of the road, invisibly. So Balaam doesn't see him, but the donkey does. And honestly, we seriously underestimate animals' abilities. But the donkey's like, oh heck no, I'm not going that way. So they turn a different way. And the angel appears again, invisibly. And the donkey is like, not doing that. And Balaam eventually gets really frustrated and he starts beating his donkey. And then Jehovah's like, he's not getting the message. I guess I'll have the donkey talk. So he makes the donkey talk, and the donkey's like, why are you beating me? I've never done anything to you. I've been the donkey you've ridden your whole life, and, I thought we were cool, bruh. And Balaam's like, you're making me look like a fool. And legit, I don't know. And Balaam's not scared by this. Apparently, if a donkey starts talking to you, just talk back to it. So while they're having a conversation about the ethics of animal treatment, God decides to make the angel visible. So the angel appears finally, and Balaam's like, oh, that's why the donkey wasn't going. And the angel's like, yeah, if you had kept going, and you would have been dead and your donkey would have been alive. If you're brave and want to look this up in a Bible, it is Numbers 22 through 33. Second story, we have Lot and his daughters. So Lot, his wife, and his daughters are told to leave Sodom because it's all sinful and evil and Jehovah hates it and he's going to destroy it. And so they flee. Lot's wife looks back because, fireballs are falling on the city and people are probably screaming. So she looks back. But Jehovah's like, you're longing for that sinful life, and just turns her into a pillar of salt. So now Lot is homeless and a widow, and his two daughters are also motherless. They flee. They don't want to go to the neighboring town, and so they decide to live in a cave until Jehovah thinks of the next step. So while they're living in a cave, the daughters start plotting, and they're like, hey, everybody that we've ever known died back there. And when the only purpose of us being alive, because we're women in Bible times, is to bear children. So what are we going to do? So they get their father intoxicated and become pregnant. So even though they are two unmarried women living in a cave with their dad with no clear plans for the future, it's important that they procreate. And again, if you're brave enough, this story is found at Genesis 19, verses 30 through 36. Last but not least, we have King David, the Bible's erased bisexual king. He's in love with Saul's daughter, Michal, for the moment, because he's also said to be in love with Saul's son, Jonathan. And the version that you'll find in the kids' book says that Saul told him, okay, you can marry my daughter, but you have to go and kill 100 Philistines first. And once you've proven to me that you've killed 100 of my enemies, then you can marry my daughter. And this was really his way of trying to set David up, because he wanted David to be murdered by, one man versus 100, but that's not how it worked. But what the scripture actually says is, the king does not want any bride price except 100 skins of the Philistines to take revenge on the enemies of the king. And just like Balaam and the talking donkey, David does not think this is strange. Apparently this is a normal request, Bible times, And he's like, top that. You have 2 hot kids? You know what? I'm going to bring you 200 skins. And this story is found at 1 Samuel 18, verses 25 through 27. The donkey that talks, the daughters that are word, and the king that collects 5 skins. A believing Jehovah's Witness, probably from the very beginning of this video, would say that Genesis 3:15 links all 3 of these upsetting stories by having the overall theme that Jehovah protects his people and makes a way for his people. He stopped Balaam from going to the Israelites. He rescued Lot from Sodom. And he didn't let the Philistines kill David when he was performing surgery. And they use this scripture, Genesis 3:15, and what happened in Eden, the original sin, to justify to Jehovah's Witnesses why there's hurt and pain and evil in the world, why people do terrible things, why there are wars. They are told that God has a plan. He's had a plan from the beginning. That's this Genesis 3:15. He's gonna, everything you're experiencing now is just a bruise in the heel. Even though your dad died slowly and painfully, it's just a bruise in the heel overall to the woman's offspring. And they're supposed to believe that God had to answer the challenge that Satan posed in the Garden of Eden. That Satan posed a question of God's sovereignty, and in order for him to answer this, he needed to let men prove that they cannot be rulers of themselves, choosing right and wrong for themselves. And also that brings in Jesus and his sacrifice. They had to have a pure, perfect man, because Adam, before the sin, was a pure, perfect man. So it balances out. Now, I would like to just suggest, I'm definitely not perfect, and I'm definitely not an all-knowing being. But if we go to my book of Bible stories and go back to story 10, the Great Flood, we learn about Noah, and that God chose Noah. He spread a message, told them, God doesn't like the way that you're living. If you don't change it, then you're all going to die. And so God ended up killing everybody in Noah's town, and it was just Noah, his sons, their wives, and Noah's wife, and all the animals on the ark. Okay? And God made a promise that he wouldn't destroy all living creation with a flood ever again. So the only people left were believing people who believed in God, not wicked people. Man had proved at that point that they weren't going to do the right thing, and God chose his people, gave them a warning. They didn't listen to the warning and just destroyed all the wickedness. So then they had a perfect earth again. Now, while the humans were not exactly perfect, you could have had, say, one of Noah's son's wives, maybe, instead of the Virgin Mary, carry Jesus and birth the Messiah, who would then sacrifice his perfect life and cleanse everyone of that sin. And then everyone from there on out would be free from that original sin. And Jehovah's Witnesses believe that they'll work their way back to perfection after Armageddon. And after Noah's daughter-in-law gave birth to Jesus, and he sacrificed his perfect life as an answer to the ransom, they could have worked back to perfection for 1,000 years. And it would have all been settled then. Then there would have been no Rwanda genocide and World War II and COVID. Just a thought.